It's delightful to be back at the Women's Forum, particularly with a panel which is really about the most important part of the future, the next generation, how we are going to cultivate them as leaders, as future leaders. One of the things that I, as management editor of the Financial Times, try to fight against is the jargon in this area. The war for talent, with all due respect to, I think, McKinsey, who coined it in the 1990s, is a 1990s term for appointing and producing leaders. And so I'm very pleased that the title of our panel goes with the more benign version of cultivating leaders rather than fighting for them. We might debate part of this on the panel this morning. I've got four experts to discuss it with me. April Fike from ExxonMobil, Inga Beale from Lloyd's, Arta Sudun from Publicis, and Magat Wade, whose latest venture is Skin is Skin. I think that's right, Magat. So I want to start with April and ask you really what ExxonMobil is doing to take advantage of this next generation, and whether it's an opportunity or possibly in some respects a threat.
Well, great. Well, thank you, Andrew. And it's a real pleasure to be here, my first time here at the Women's Forum. As I was thinking about what I was going to say this morning, I was thinking about the different perspectives that were going to be coming from this audience. And whether you're a business leader, an NGO, or a government official, we're all looking and challenged by how do we develop the next generation of our daring leaders. And I actually look at this as an absolute opportunity. I'm probably an optimist, so I'll tell you I think it's an absolute opportunity. But we have a lot of great challenges ahead of us, and we have a lot of great opportunities for the youth today. And I think that each one of us, no matter where we come from, need to play our part in finding the right partners and sponsoring and supporting and influencing how we develop the youth today so that they are set up with the skills that they need as they come into the work environment. When I think back to what made me choose to do what I'm doing today, I have worked for ExxonMobil now for over 20 years, and I'm a chemical engineer by training. And what made me go into chemical engineering, I have to think back to when I was about 16 years old. And I had a fantastic teacher that made me realize that I had all the opportunity ahead of me if I chose to go into engineering. And he made me realize the exciting opportunities and challenges and things that I could do from a global perspective, even if I actually got the education so that I could have the foundation needed to move forward. And it was that passion and that drive that he put in me that made me make that choice. And that choice I made at 16. And I was lucky to have access to fantastic teachers, access to the curriculum that was needed for me to have the right foundation so that I could be very successful at university, as well as then when I moved into the professional world. And when we look at what we need at ExxonMobil, and when we think of the energy industry, and I'm kind of disappointed I didn't get an opportunity to sit through the entire panel, only at the very end on what was talked about climate change. We have a lot of challenges and opportunities ahead, and what we see as our biggest opportunity area is in the STEM education area, and that is science, technology, engineering, and maths. And if we can get the right level of students, the right support for the youth today to get excited and energized and passionate about the opportunities that lie ahead, they will absolutely be there to support and drive and implement the solutions that we need from a global perspective. Why do we find that important in the energy industry? So I think you probably heard a lot about this in this last session. But we see energy as absolutely critical in both supporting the continued advancement of developed economies, as well as absolutely essential when you look at what developing economies need. When the UN takes a look at how developed is a country, it looks at three factors. It has an index. It looks at the education level, it looks at income, and it looks at life expectancy. And when you chart that with how high is that index for how developed is a country, and you look at the energy usage of that country, they go hand in hand. Development and industry and energy go hand in hand. And if we put that in the context of what we have and the challenge we have, especially when we think about energy poverty, there are still over 1 billion people on the planet that do not have access to electricity. There are 4 million people that die a year because they do not have access to clean fuels for cooking. And so when it comes to what we think are basic needs, which all of us have the same basic drive, and that is quality of life, that is a clean environment, and that is a better future for our children, it's absolutely critical when we also think about how do we do that. And we absolutely have a shortage, we feel a shortage in STEM education and getting the youth to support how do we get this talent to come on board and support driving the influence and changing what we need going forward. And this is an exciting time. I mean, there's a lot of passion and there's a lot of challenge, but there's a whole lot of opportunity. And there is time to make that change. And so we at ExxonMobil are very dedicated to supporting STEM education. We have an ExxonMobil Foundation. We have 3 different main priorities. One of those is actually women's and the economic development of women, but that's not the one I'm talking about today. One of the other ones we have is STEM education and supporting education around the globe. We have spent over $1.2 billion since the early 2000s in supporting different education and finding the right partners. Again, we are not education experts, but it's how do we identify those correct partnerships, those correct NGOs, the governments, the different ministries that we work with to help support and develop education and support the youth, and not only getting the right teachers and support for the teachers, but development of curriculum for those different the different countries, but also in how do we impassion and drive passion in students to be interested in going into STEM and showing them the great opportunity that lies ahead. And I think that that's one thing that we absolutely take advantage of.
So you alluded to it, and the last panel was about it. You're in a controversial industry. How early, if at all, should you be getting in to talk directly to students about careers at ExxonMobil?
Yeah, and I'd say there's a few different approaches here. I would say probably the primary is around the high school age, but it's very important that you get the right, that secondary school, so 15 to 18 is probably our target range. You want to make sure you have the right prerequisite courses that are needed when you go and you can start university. But that's also why we look to how do we influence the education system, because in many cases there may not be the maths or the sciences available at schools. Teachers may not be equipped yet to actually be able to teach effectively. So we have a couple of things we do. We have the National Math and Science Initiative, in which we do both teaching teachers and also influencing the curricula. That is now expanded outside of the United States, but of the 1,000 schools that it's gone to in the United States, the students coming out have a 10-time better score than the national average of those that are not in that program for the courses required for STEM. Same thing, we also have what I would say, we start in middle school just getting interested, I would say, in sciences. So again, putting challenges out there and getting them interested so that when they get to that high school level, they're really interested in taking those science and maths courses.
Okay, we'll come back to some of the other examples, but let me move on to Inga. Obviously, Lloyd's, it's an insurance. It's not an industry that certainly when I was 16 I thought about, or let alone knew anything about. I mean, this is an initial challenge, isn't it, to get people over the bar of thinking of going into your own industry. How do you deal with that?
It is, and I just happened to end up in insurance. I think at that time when I was looking for a job, I was going to get paid £300 more a year to do insurance versus go and join the aviation business. So that was my decision.
Did you know anything about insurance?
I knew nothing about it, but I made that choice based on a very fundamental issue, was how much they were going to pay me. But I've been in this sector for 35 years, and it is absolutely amazing. And now I can talk passionately about it for hours. And it's something about insurance which does something good for the world. Lloyd's has been around for nearly 330 years, and over those centuries, we've been enabling human progress, if you like, because we've been de-risking investments in the future. So anyone who wanted to go and do something new, whether it was send a satellite up to space, we were there ensuring it. So if it went wrong, we would pay out. And that has enabled, human progress throughout the world. So we're very, very proud of actually the service we provide, but a lot of people see insurance as pretty dull, and I often hear men and women say it's not very sexy. So we've got to do something to make it more sexy and appealing, because we are not appealing to graduates, we're not necessarily appealing to people leaving school. We've got a problem. And I think particularly since the financial crisis, the whole financial services sector has another cloud sort of hanging over it. 1 in 5 millennials will not want to go anywhere near the financial services sector because they think it's got a very negative image. So we really are up against it here. And women are far less likely to want to join insurance than men. And it's very interesting. In Lloyd's, we have a physical marketplace still. It's a totally unique operation, Lloyd's. It's nothing to do with the bank, by the way. We're totally independent of the bank, never have been to do with them, and in fact we're older than Lloyd's Bank. We are an insurance market, and in operating in the market we have actually about 80 or so different businesses. So we literally provide a physical marketplace. This is how it started in London, where they all come together and it is like a market, and we have 4 floors of trading, brokers coming in every day, negotiating the biggest, most complex insurance deals in the world face to face. So it's a very, very old-fashioned way of doing business, and we're having to adapt the way we operate around the world. But fundamentally, it's a very old-fashioned sector. And when I started work in the 80s, Lloyd's would have been the last place on earth I wanted to work. I didn't start in Lloyd's. I used to walk past the building every day. I was petrified of it. It was so threatening to a young woman. It was full of men. It still is full of men in suits. And it's very, very scary. And in fact, one of the women who works for me, she brought one of her children to work. We have a, bring your kids to work, see what your parents do. Little 7-year-old walked into this trading room, and the first thing he said was, "Mummy, why are they all wearing uniform?" He was shocked. I mean, he couldn't believe that this was work. Why on earth are they all looking the same and dressed the same? And I thought, already we're putting him off our sector. How are we going to attract the next gen? And we've done a piece of research. We've got 34,000 people literally working in the square mile in insurance. So literally, it's a physical place at the moment in London. We did a survey of that, and it published the results last year. And the population, the percentage of the workforce of 34,000 below the age of 30 has dropped in the last 2 years. So we've got a fundamental problem attracting them, and then importantly keeping them. We have people who come in and they last 18 months, and then they go and they say, this isn't a culture, this is too old-fashioned, it's too rigid. So we do have a problem. We're trying to do our best to make it more attractive, because it is such actually an interesting field.
Is it, and here I'm talking about financial services generally, isn't it still about the money?
Right, so money, of course, plays into it. But fundamentally, the satisfaction, the fulfillment you get out of working in insurance, watching those terrible tragedies in the Caribbean, across Florida, Texas, the windstorms, the hurricanes, you go to Mexico, the earthquakes that have happened, which are disastrous and deep tragedies, and somehow get overlooked because the US is the key focus. We've got flooding in Asia, we've got typhoons in Asia, we've got all of these disasters happening across the world. If you work in insurance, yes, it's money, but that's when we fulfill our promise.
Right, but the attraction for the new recruit, when they're weighing things up, aren't they still making the calculation that you made?
Well, apparently, according to the researchers, more and more people are looking for that social purpose. So when you can sell insurance as having that strong social purpose, theoretically, we should be able to appeal to the next gen who are much more focused on that social purpose. And we just haven't done a very good job of selling the social purpose of insurance.
Right. That's a good link into what I know, Magat, you want to talk about. And the question really, I suppose, is, is there some stepping back from the what is my choice of career Is there something earlier in the educational process that is missing or that needs to be instilled to give the next generation the impetus to make the right choices when they're confronted by Exxon's offer or Lloyd's offer?
Well, first, thanks for having me. I think for me, when we're talking about the next generation of leaders, I have a serious beef with education as we know it. And all around the world, I have a serious problem with education. Because we are not training our young people to be critical thinkers, independent thinkers, and we're not fostering innovation in them. That's just a simple fact. Especially when people are worried about the arrival of robots coming and taking our jobs. Well, guess what? What they're going to be able to take is what is repetitive work. So if you're not engaging that brain of yours, yeah, the robot is going to take your job, and they should take your job. Exercise your humanity or become obsolete. So, because education is so important to me, and I really am for freeing all children, I believe that one day we're going to call our traditional schools, we're going to call them prisons. We're going to remember them as prisons for kids. I know I'm very radical, but anyway, I'll take you on my path here. See, I come from Senegal, west coast of Africa, and it is super, super, super important for me that we find a way to leapfrog so that our young people can be part of the future. Otherwise, we're going to be left in the dust. And I have no interest in seeing that. That's why I am very interested in education. So, for me, it's not just about talk. I happen to be an entrepreneur in residence at a very unique school. We call it the CO School, K-O School, CO School. It's based in Austin, Texas. And this school has been inspired by the founders of conscious capitalism. I don't know if anybody here knows of conscious capitalism. You know, these type of companies that are purpose-driven, and where for us, it's not about the shareholder only, but about a set of stakeholders. And before I make a decision as an entrepreneur, I have to make sure that we have a win-win-win-win-win relationship between the stakeholders of my company. And what are they? Of course, my employees, my suppliers, the community in which my company thrives, your customers, as well as the environment, right? So a school like that, again, like I said, the founders of conscious capitalism inspired it. One of them happens to be my husband. Another one is the founder of Whole Foods Market. And another one is the VP of Leadership and Organizational Development at LinkedIn. So some very serious people on this topic. But for today, I'll just focus on the two things that are really distinctive about this type of school. And by the way, I'm moving now to San Francisco to replicate the same type of school there, because these are hubs of innovation. Austin and San Francisco are, and the people there truly understand what we're talking about, because it is about the future. So the one aspect that's very key about what we do is achieving high performance, because what we do is we align the goals of our students with their program. So when the kids start their year, we sit with them and they make up their goals. And each kid gets to have a custom designed program for his or her goals done. And by doing that, we have made unusual SAT gains. And the SAT gains, for those of you who are not American, it's the key test for college admission. So we are 5 times above national average. And then the second thing that we are very good at doing at the type of schools we have is the primary focus that we have on coaching our students to be more effective at learning how to learn. And most importantly, in my mind also, working effectively with others. And we talk here about gender discrimination, right? And we wonder, should we start? Yes, of course, there's a lot you can do at home. But what is happening in these schools of ours? What is happening in these schools of ours? And some of us would like to say that actually the team culture is pretty pathological culture in the Western world. That's true. So in our school, what do we do about the gender relationship, for example? So we do Socratic discussions. Every single day, the kids go through hours of Socratic discussion. And when during the Socratic discussion, the guide, we don't call our teachers, we call them the guide. When the guide notices that April was talking, April was talking, Arthur is interrupting April. Well, the guide would say, hey, Arthur, did you notice that you just interrupted her? And we'll just coach you as a dominant male to not do that. And then...
You can note that I didn't say one word yet. And I am already the dominant male
That's right.
with a suit.
That's
by the way.
right. You're guilty by your genre. Okay, so and then we'll also talk to April and say, April, did you notice that he interrupted you? And did you notice when he started talking over you? Well, you have to address it politely, but take back the floor. And by doing that, I am amazingly surprised day in and day out by how strong and confident our young ladies are, and also by how thoughtful our young people, our young men are. And it's really just mind-blowing. So on all of that, just to say that, I know that many are excited about technology in education, and that's great. We use technology very judiciously in the content that we provide to our kids. But I do believe that the 21st century skills that we need is truly about capable people having meaningful interactions with their peers. Actually, I did not make this up. Even Google found out that it doesn't matter how many smart people they have in their room. If those people in the room do not work well together, you don't have the best from them. So what are we doing right now to make sure that our young people are really prepared for this future coming at them? And that's really what we focus on. We make sure that the technology is there to just push the content, but that we use the human beings to coach them for the interpersonal relationship, like connection with others. And it has to happen real time. None of this madness of, preaching to you at treat each other equally. No, it's real-time follow-up on what it is that you're doing and coaching you so that you can work with your partner regardless of how different she may be from you. That's the type of education I'm interested in, and unfortunately, I'm not seeing it too many places.
I may be wrong. I may be wrong, Magat, but I'm sensing that at an earlier age, no matter how persuasive April and Inga were about persuading you to join the energy or the insurance industry, you might not have been on the receptive end of the candidates.
Depends. Except that, I heard April say, well, we are trying to partner. I want to challenge companies. You really mean business? Show me that you mean business. If you really care about the next generation, it has to be about the next generation and not just about your companies. And maybe if you do it that way, maybe, yes, they will come and join you. So as you're thinking about maybe partnering with schools, I will challenge you to look at the quality of schools in which you are trying to work on. And also companies who really mean it. You walk the walk and talk the talk. Maybe do what I do as a business owner, where I'm giving 50% of my profits of my second company to entrepreneurial schools in Senegal, because we're creating the same type of school in Senegal. Right now it's an after-school program, and next year it turns into a real school. So be real. And maybe then all of a sudden you get cool and sexy.
So, Artur, coming to you. You've already been caricatured as the dominant male, as the male.
I can tell you, I'm a man.
How does a company like Publicis, you've taken over as CEO this year, how does it go about attracting people who are coming from the opening background of somebody like Magat, who wants to go into be an entrepreneur, who wants to do a startup? This is the kind of next generation, inspiring next generation choices that perhaps didn't exist before. How does a big company do that?
I'm going to answer that in exactly 2 seconds. And I would like to come back on one point that Magat said. I don't know if I'm a dominant male, maybe. But for sure, I'm not an expert in HR and education. But where I think we have a different point of view is I am impressed by the new generation. I think the people that are from 25 to 35 today are incarnating a new way of seeing the world, looking for a purpose, as you said, trying to bring good to this planet. And I want to believe that education has something to do with that. Is that perfect? I don't think so. But I think we should be proud. And more importantly, we should value this next generation for where they are. And we have this responsibility. And this is a point that is very important for me, is that if we want our planet to succeed, if we want France, because I'm French, and by the way, we have a young president that you can like it or not, but at least is bringing this kind of energy and newness that is necessary to a world that needs to change. And so I don't think we should blame our educational system. I think we should enrich it, but I think that the start is not that bad. I'll come back to your question, which is obviously for us, I mean, which is entitled here, which is, if you look at Publicis, 100% of our market cap come from our talent. The only thing we sell is talent. And I'll take a bit of time to give you a quick anecdote, and that I'll move on, but I think the anecdote speaks better than any panel or anything. I was in Frankfurt for a South by Southwest event, a bit like this, with Google and Facebook there. And there were like 900 young kids in the room. And I say, who among you think about changing job in the next 3 to 4 years? 900 hands. 900 hands. I say, okay, now you have 2 options. We can propose you to go either at Publicis or to go at Google. Who would go to Publicis? 4 hands, including mine, by the way. Including mine. So it says everything about the challenge we are having as the old industry. You rightly said, you won't go into financial services when you were young. You won't go into advertising today as you would have been a couple of decades ago. And at Publicis, we are trying to do 2 things. And I think the 2 messages, and I hope that the 2 messages is something that all of you can take out. The first is we want to stay true to who we are. I think that the biggest mistake you can do when change is coming is try to change who you are. And actually, we are trying to cultivate our difference in everything we do. And our difference, in our case, is very simple. The Google and Facebook of the world could be very innovative, much more powerful than we are, but they bring product and services where we bring ideas. And for the young generation, being able every day to have an impact on our client life by bringing big idea could be as good as working for Google and Facebook. I have to take your point because I think it's so important, and this is how we're also trying to cultivate our difference, is that we have to do good. It's not easy. It's easy to say, not easy to do, but I want to believe that this is part of it. So this is what we're keeping. And now what we're changing to go fast is roughly 4 things. The first is training. I mean, this generation wants to learn every day, and this is something that we are trying to do here again today. Second is having more opportunity, making sure that they can do stuff and get recognized, and we have created a platform called Marcel that is doing that, so we're putting technology to get more opportunity. Connectivity, scale-enabled connectivity, and when you are a group of 80,000 people, you can do that. And last but not least, even though it's at the same time the topic of those today and something that we are not tackling in this panel, is obviously diversity, because in our case, we are in a creative business, and we know that big ideas come from diversity. So roughly this is it, trying to stay who we are, have a real point of difference, and in the same time acknowledging that we, as a company, have to change profoundly if we want to make sure that we attract this generation that here again I value a lot.
Can you not just assume that people are going to move on, the 900 in the room who are all going to think we want another job, and treat them like that? Or are you determined to keep everybody?
I mean, I think I believe in consistency and longevity. And by the way, when I look at a CV, if you had already 5 or 6 experience of 2 or 3 years, I'm not interested in the profile. Having said that, here again, you have to put your shoes into those people's shoes. They are looking for the next opportunity, whatever they do. So the question is, how do you give them a future, a perspective, and by the way, a group like ours can, to actually move on and progress along the way. And this is a big question for us because we have been organized in a way that was not making this possible. And this is exactly what we are changing with Maurice Lévy and Anne-Gabrielle over there.
I'm going to throw a question back to Magat and then to Inga and April, but obviously, one of the things that attracts people to big companies is big problems. I mean, big challenges that you will tackle. You talked about the things that Lloyd's are dealing with in catastrophe insurance and so on. These are big problems that can be attractive to people, and that startups, with all their excitement and the idea of doing something for yourself, you're often tackling the problem of starting up more than the big problem that big companies might tackle. Is this the sort of is the attraction to the younger generation of startups sufficiently great over a longer period to offset the attraction of the big companies?
Well, I think you see it as you're starting up. I think young people, and by the way, I don't think I ever said that young people are not amazing. I think actually young people are so amazing that we owe them an amazing education. So, but to go back to your question, I think what companies like ours have going for them, again, is we are purpose-driven, and our size works for us. And people feel that they can be part of a solution. When you come into a company where you happen to be employee number 10,000, and don't take me wrong, we need everybody. We need big companies, small companies, middle-sized companies. We need everyone. You have your challenges, I have my challenges too, by the nature of the size of our companies. Absolutely. It just happens to be that for now, a lot of younger people prefer to join companies like ours, trying to tackle the issues in the way we tackle them. And that works for us. Sometimes it's really hard for us to compete with a company like Google or even Publicis, and we have to deal with that too. So not everything is perfect all the time, but I think we have that going for us. So let's see what we can do with it.
April, can ExxonMobil replicate the excitement of a startup for a generation that is looking for that kind of entrepreneurial experience? Quite a straight-laced company, Exxon.
Yeah, I would say it'd be hard for us to replicate a startup. I think we'd probably offer something maybe a little bit different. But to your point, we have very large challenges. We have very large assets. We have very large ability to come in and learn quickly and get contributing extremely fast as well. So yeah, it might be a little more difficult if you really wanted to start up at the ground level, and be part of an initial startup. Yeah, ExxonMobil is not a startup. I mean, we've got a huge responsibility that we've already got, and so. But again, that doesn't mean you can't come in and have extreme influence. I am being reverse mentored actually right now, and it's actually from one of our IT resources. And so we absolutely do listen as leadership to the younger generation. And I would absolutely tell you, we are very targeted at looking at who we join with, what schools we support, what types of education. When we look at the fact that today in science and engineering, only 12% of the population is women, that's absolutely not okay from an ExxonMobil perspective. And so that's absolutely a target when we look at how do we want to help teach the next generation. How do we get them the right critical thinking skills and the confidence to go out there and pursue what they can do to change and challenge the norm? Absolutely, that is what we do. We see that, we're very supportive of that, and we do listen. And so, we are large, but we're also very influential, and that is something that you can actually take as a younger person and come in and recognize that you can actually come in and make that influence and change.
Inge, do you see this in the generation that's coming into Lloyd's now, that they want you as a sort of staging post to something else? And is that a problem? You're going to have to give them quite a lot of training, which they might then just take somewhere else. Is that bad?
I think this is going to be the new way of working, isn't it? In that people are going to be working much, much longer, and they're going to have multiple stages of their career, and they're going to have to be learning all along the way. And no way is anyone leaving education now and saying, well, I'm going into this career. In Lloyd's, we have people who've been there 30 years, 40. I've 35 years in insurance. It's just not going to happen like that for the next gen. They have to think differently. They are thinking differently. They want to do this, and they want to flit over and do that. They have a totally different approach. Most of them are also doing more than one job. They want to do multiple things. And we have to, in order to be able to keep them, so that we don't spend lots of money on training them and getting them up to what we, have the skills that we need, and then they just leave. That's a really tough thing, is actually keeping them. So we're trying to do all sorts of programs and get them involved in designing their own futures and things like that. But when you've got a culture that's so traditional, and you've got to change that culture. Culture is one of the most difficult things to change in any sector, and that's our challenge, I guess, when we're big and traditional.
And Artur, is that the same attitude that you have? Generally, I tend to think of advertising and marketing as being areas where people have been more mobile traditionally between different agencies. They've taken their skills, portable skills, elsewhere.
They have been mobile, which at the end of the day was not a bad thing if you manage it properly. The thing, and I think that this is a common point with financial services, is that what is shifting is not people. What is shifting is the core of our business. what we are doing today will be is very different from what we'll be doing in 5 or 7 years. And so the question lies, and I'm taking back your topic about the next generation of daring leaders. I don't think we speak enough about daring. And by the way, I'm not saying this because we are reasonably big companies, but we have much bigger company on the panel, or you have seen during this week. I think that the manager that has to dare the most are actually not the one in the startup. They are the one running very big business with a lot of people involved. Because what you don't see when you run this kind of company, and by the way, what the next generation is looking for is how can you make sure that while you're running such a big business, you can give a future and make people progress individually in this world that is changing so fast.
Right, but how do you, okay, so the daring leaders are the leaders of the big companies, but that's only one person in the case of Publicis, it's you. How do you get the daring...
First of all, it's not me, it's Maurice Levy, so let's put the thing where they are. Second, so I haven't been clear on that, and it's a very important point, is that, you won't be able to transform any of the company we are running if people within the company does not feel that it's part of their job to change and to dare. And the question is not how do you dare at the top. And by the way, this is maybe the only thing I've been really changing at Publicis. If you look at the way we run the company today, it's much flatter than it was before. Because this is where the winning formula is.
So I just wanted to add, because what tends to happen in the startups, of course, is they thrive on failure. They love it. And you have to have failed once, twice, 3, 4, 5 times. Otherwise, you're not allowed to stay almost. You've got to have failure in these startups. And that's a really daring thing for big business to do. Particularly, you're listed on some stock exchange somewhere, you've got to protect yourself. So, but if we can learn a little bit from the startups and bring that sense of it's okay to fail into our culture, I think that's the way we can develop daring leaders.
So I'm just going to get to the final question about the action that you think you will take in pushing for this next generation of daring leaders. April, one thing in brief that you would bring into possibly a different thing that ExxonMobil isn't already doing.
Yeah, and I guess I would go exactly and say that I think that the leadership and the daring leadership comes from all levels of the organization, not just from the absolute top. And so it's really saying, how do we encourage the taking that energy and that passion, that difference and that diversity that we're going to get from the younger generation and encourage that and say, make sure that we are encouraging them to be daring and vocal and help influence in how we will change. And I think that is something that we're looking from a cultural perspective to say, we want to harness that leadership and we want to see that leadership from the young generation.
Inga, is there something that Lloyds is doing to bring that kind of daring leadership out at an early age? What are you looking for? Well,
we're definitely looking to attract new types of talent, because the thing is, we are changing dramatically. So even though we're very traditional, we need people to do work that we never needed. We need data scientists. We need people who are experts in cybersecurity. We need the best medical experts. And that's our challenge, is actually attracting people to insurance, because they wouldn't understand that, oh gosh, So I've been in the armed forces, and I'm actually an anti-terrorism expert. I can go and do that in insurance. Yes, you can, because these are the risks we're taking on. So we've got a massive outreach program, actually not just Next Gen, but going into all those areas that we never actually used to go to say, come and have a career here. And we're also talking about celebrating difference. So we've had, for the 3rd year this year, our Dive In Festival, which is a celebration of diversity and inclusion, where we're talking about all sorts of different types, and it's full of colour, unlike the usual grey that insurance is associated with. And this year we had events running across the world in 32 cities in 17 countries, and we're just getting a whole dialogue going with all the different generations and tackling all sorts of diversity issues. And I think it's going to make a huge difference.
Arthur, one thing that you're doing at Publicis, or want to do at Publicis, to take action to get these daring leaders to stay with you and join you?
There is a series of action, and I won't go into detail. I gave you a few minutes ago, but it's more about the spirit and the value. I think that whatever the size, by the way, and obviously it's more difficult when you go into big organization, what you need to always fuel and accelerate is the entrepreneurship spirit. If you have a young audience that is coming to your company feeling that they are part of it, and by the way, they owe it, then you have made a big part of the job. And this is the role of all of us, to make sure that whatever the size of the company, they feel that the future of the company depends on what they will have in terms of impact.
Magat, give us a last rallying cry for action on getting daring leaders.
Well, I absolutely believe in what April said. You know, I believe that there are 7 billion geniuses in this world, and I believe that it is our job to bring it out of them. And so for me, it's just about keeping on doing what we're doing and being open to changing along the way as we see better things working out, or some things don't work, you dump them, and that's just all it is for me, just helping the human spirit flourish and soar.
Great way to end. Please thank our panel for excellent insights. Thank you.